We are on. We are on. Are we on? Everybody on? How are you doing after this intense day? Yes, exactly. If you're doing good, show me like this. If you're so like this, and if you're not so good like this. That's good feedback. That's feedback for the organization, for the... yeah. And, you know, like I'm sitting here with you, listening to the lectures with you, and it feels like I went through so many different inner states. Just feeling, you know, being inspired, being touched, having new ideas. I think I rewrote my lecture hundreds of times, but then of course I don't have time to redo the PowerPoint presentation, so we'll see what comes tonight. Are you ready for more? Yes. Yeah? We've had an introduction to mindfulness, which of course, if you are a craniosacral practitioner, this beginning lecture was just laying down the ground of the state of the practitioner, where we are aiming at to be present, not busy with ourselves, but oriented to moment by moment, now. So we did an exercise. And we had the next lecture, and with a beautiful bridging and making us aware of what we all do. And we had an exercise of sensing and expanding and sensing and maybe connecting with that tide. And then Franklin comes. Oh, by the way, you know, Franklin, when I'm inspired by you and I felt touched here, Franklin, I just wanted to hug. He's such an old, dear friend, and it felt the screen in between, I just wanted to hug him and say, you know, like, you thank us. Yes, let's thank each other that we are on that path of working with people and working in a way that orients to that inner wisdom. Because we could be working and orienting to all the troubles, the problems, to everything that doesn't work. We heard the particles, they behave according to how we orient, how we look. So if we want to support that inner wisdom, that inner intelligence to manifest, to come to the foreground, it depends very much on our orientation. Are we listening for health or for the problem? So this is what of course, I'm working in this field for so many years that it feels like, of course, but that's not what happens to me. It's every moment again new. You know, it felt like, yes, I've heard this, yes, I've done this, and no, I've never heard it, and I've never done it, because now is different than ever before. So even though the title of my short lecture, I called it about the dance between the therapist and the client. Actually, I very rarely talk about therapist. I always use the word practitioner. And that's how it feels, you know? You can be practicing this work for a day, for a year, for 10 years, for 50 years, and then it is new the next day, the next time. So you're still practicing we are still practicing. So I consider us practitioners forever. We are practicing something that, well, I don't know about you, but I was not taught in school. I was not taught in school to pay attention to the inside. And I certainly was not taught in school to have a wide awareness. On the contrary, focus. No, one thing, this, do this, do that. Like, and I was sometimes a little bit more, I don't know if you can see me, but I was a little bit more like this as a child. You know, like in awe of nature around me, in awe of a butterfly. And I could get lost. And I said, come on here, do this, do this. And slowly I was, maybe you too, trained to not see so many things at once. Then we come to a cranial training and they tell us again, there's more than one thing happening at the same time. And if you see the problem, how about seeing health in that problem? What did you say? If you can see apparent contradictions as not a but an and, you know, this and this, it's complementary. I mean, it complements each other. So the training that we have, and many of us need to learn that really the hard way, or unlearn, to be able to sit again, still, wide, open, with that perception that is oriented to health, so we can actually support a client to get in touch with that inner wisdom. And we can listen to the tidal motion as a movement coming out of stillness that reconnects us with our spirit, with our soul, with our heart, with our body. But this morning, some questions were here about, some frustration from some practitioners. Clients don't get better. Other frustrations about, well, what do we actually do? We cannot really talk about what we do. Somebody else says, but something happens anyway, even if I don't know quite what it is. So as we're orienting to the title of this lecture here, or of the conference, and then to my title of the lecture, and we could maybe show the second picture. Yes, the dance between the therapist and the client, that's also practice. Yeah. You were dancing very beautifully with each other. You know, so did you practice before? Did you tune into each other? Did you listen to each other? Yeah. So, you know, how do we look at that? It's a dance, yes. It has to do with attunement, with resonance, with welcoming someone in that accepting way. I'm just trying to pull all the different threads together that we're opening up today. There is some science, some research that was studying the effect of medication on patients. And they were studying the difference between administering the medication and the effect of the medication. How does it work for that pain? And how does it work if the doctor or the person that administers the medication talks to the patient, engages, explains, orients what this is about, this pill here. So a moment of contact, human connection, emphasized the effect of the medication they took. Now, that's coming from a medical field, this study, that people get better when there is also human connection, when there is a relating. Now, that for us might not sound so strange, but in that field that the study comes from, they were then saying, well, maybe we need to train our medical personnel in the art of empathy. No, maybe that's missing for people to get better faster or easier. If there is just somebody there that has a presence with the other. So I want to look at that with you, and I'm actually not so sure which slide comes next. But there's something, oh yes, there is something about our state of the practitioner that we have heard about today, we have practiced, and I like this picture, it's from Magritte. It's called The Wanderer. And it symbolizes for me how we actually start a session, a treatment. It's not right away into the doing something with the other, offering you that medication, offering you a treatment. It's actually the start is always first here. And we've heard that today, and we know that. If we access that space in us, that's not spacious, not spaced out. It's actually grounded. Can you see his feet on the ground? Feet on the ground. Put your feet on the ground, everybody. 2 feet on the ground. Feel your feet on the ground. Do I also have a chair? Okay. Do you have 2 feet on the ground? And we can look out, we can connect and still feel the feet. Is that true? We can do 2 things at once, right? Feel the feet and look. Okay, put your hands on your thighs. Okay, now you're just doing something that you probably not do naturally. So I'll take you a little bit out of your comfort zone. 2 feet on the ground, 2 hands on the thigh. And you're feeling your feet, you're sensing your hands, you're hearing my voice, and you're still looking. Already 4 things at once. So as we are practicing more and more to sense ourselves and to orient in, as we are also orienting out, that space might get created. That is a bit more spacious, a little slower, and certainly more present to that moment now. And if I meet my client from here, when I'm home in me, we have a different meeting. So I wanted to talk to you. Feel free to move again, right? To move in your usual put your things, your legs and arms in your usual way. I want to talk to you that from that practitioner state, that if you're a cranial practitioner, hopefully you have trained that from the very first day of your training. And I'm looking also beyond cranial work sometime, you know, like when you really want to see, well, what is really helpful in any kind of therapy, in any kind of meeting between two people. And it is that, we were reminded today, you know, that consciousness and that presence and that connectedness on the inside, so it's possible to connect on the outside. So there is that meeting that is essential. And in the first meeting, it often defines the course of the treatment, the sequences of the treatment, the success of the treatment. Sounds radical. And it is in that meeting when we start to establish a connection and we start to establish a sense of feeling safe, sense of safety with each other in that therapeutic relationship. That's what I want to talk to you about today. What's possible when the client and the therapist together create a meeting place where the client's alertness and the client's fear, the client's concern, the client's problem, where they can settle a bit. And I think I have a symbolic picture next. Yes, that one. That's the feeling space that should be there between the meeting of a practitioner and a client. Can we settle together? Is it safe enough to let go? Because how do you think that inherent wisdom will show itself when the whole system is in alert? Danger, alarm, you know, like, what are we going to do here? I'm not sure. What are we going to do? I'm not safe. I don't know. So there is a system in place, and as therapists, as practitioners, we will be checked out, scanned, like an internal watchdog that makes sure, is it safe, is it safe, is it safe? And when it's safe, whew, we can let down. And I thought if we start to look into that direction, you know, like there are a few things that might actually help to understand the biology, the neurobiology, the physiology of that process of meeting in safety, so that process can actually happen in a safe way. And let's see what we have next here. Yes, exactly. This might also be something that you're familiar with, might not say something new here. That Paul MacLean was a researcher, neuroscientist. He was promoting a brain, a functional brain, a model of a brain function, when not just the whole brain functions the same, but we have different areas of the brain that have their job to do. He was looking at the brain hierarchies, that there are some very old instinctual parts of our brain that when we look phylogenetically, like the whole development of mankind, you know, millions of years ago, he was talking about that central part of our brain, the brainstem, having the same function like the brain of the reptiles. So he called it reptilian brain. It's this brown one here. That's the brainstem. And he was studying that brainstem has a very important job. And the job is to keep our survival intact. So it regulates our survival, which is survival of one person, but also survival of the whole species. So that brainstem, it regulates fight, flight, freeze, but also procreation, the sexual drive, also eating, sleeping. So these basic ground functions. Now, when we get very agitated, activated, the functions of the brainstem is very much in the foreground. It's only about survival. There's not a lot of thinking possible. Or feeling. Feeling might be there, but you know, a little chaotic, a little bit too many things at once, and the whole body starts to actually feel on alert. Has it ever happened to you that, well, maybe not, but you know, it sometimes happens to me when I stand in front of a class. I'm blank. I can't think anymore. It's gone. All the thinking gone. Wow, the first time that happened, I almost went into panic. And I thought, like, now I lost it. I'm too old. I'm too senile. I can't do it anymore. And the more I had these thoughts, the worse it got, right? So luckily, we do have some skills to regulate, and found my ground again and my center, and something calmed down, and the thinking started to work again. So when brainstem is active, we don't think. No, we act instinctually. And it is that part that is at our service. It really does us a good service. So we need to be kind to that protective survival part. So you see, when, let's just talk about a client again. When a client comes, and they might just have gotten a diagnosis that their health is not okay. They might just have gone through a divorce or a problem at home. They might have been fired. They might have all kinds of disasters in their life. And they come to us to session, and we say, we relate to health. We want to feel that tide. Your inner intelligence is always there. Yes, we know. But have you ever felt a client like that? Have you felt a client that comes so overactivated? It's hard to get to a sense of the tide. It's even hard to settle together. So that meeting, that mediation on that brainstem level, on that reptilian brain level, it's very much important. Like, I see you. It's really difficult right now. I understand you're holding a lot. It's not an easy time. So let's see what we can do today if we just give that a bit of space. So in that meeting, we also need to meet that part. We cannot say, don't be so anxious, let go of your problems. invite and accept also that. Yes, okay, we take you like that. Come. Yes, of course, it is difficult. And as soon as there is another person present that looks and sees you and hears you, and you feel seen and you feel heard, we have the limbic system coming online and active. The limbic system is in the center of our brain. Do you know about the limbic system? Craniosacral practitioners, it's right around the third ventricle. All these vital centers that regulate immune system, endocrine system. It is taking care of regulation from inside and outside information. And we learned to use the limbic system in contact with mom and dad. The limbic system was not online at our birth. It was present, but not wired in. So learning to activate the limbic system and use it to down-regulate dangerous states, we learned as babies in the first 9 months, in contact with the environment. And sometimes it really feels like when there is so much, Franklin talked about suffering. When there is so much suffering present, we just need to hold someone as if they were a baby. Not making them small, but with that kind of care and that kind of attention, slowing things down. So a higher brain function can start to be present and working for the person again. So we are still, looking at the triune brain from Paul MacLean. He has brainstem, reptilian brain, the limbic system, which he calls the old mammalian system or paleomammalian system, that is part of the mammals. And mammals, they need to take care of the newborns. Otherwise, they don't survive. They need care. It's about caring and being cared for. Reptiles, they don't necessarily nurture their babies. I'm not a biologist or a zoologist, so I don't. There might be exceptions, but usually they lay eggs and they go. Or they have a bunch of little ones and they go, and they're self-sufficient. Mammals don't survive without contact. They need to be licked, stroked, held, warm. And we learned that in the very first month of our life, how that feels, to feel safe in contact. The neocortex then, where usually we say, well, that has to do with our mind, is kind of the last developed area. The higher primates, the higher mammals, have a neocortex. And of course, the humans. And that's the part where we can start to make sense of our experiences. Like you were talking today, that an experience has to do with sensing, feeling, but also that place, that part that then knows that we had an experience and can make sense, can reflect. And we use this model for the triune brain to explain a lot of the phenomenons that we encounter in our work. It's helpful as a model. It doesn't cover everything, you know, like if I had another 3 months to talk, maybe I could cover everything, but it's like it's a big, complex subject. But I just wanted to lay out that when we talk about a meeting between therapist and client, yeah, you might have clients that come and they talk from here. That's where they live. That's where they're trained. It's the opposite of what I was describing before, right? Somebody that comes in is completely scattered and in shamble and so, no. Oh, I know about this, I heard this, and no, I know I need this, and no, I don't think that is the good way to go, and I really would like you to do this with me now, because, and what, by the way, what is it that you do, and tell me exactly, and so can we welcome that? Somebody that wants to know, is curious, and says, tell me. And no, I'm not so sure. I'm very skeptical about this work. I'm not sure if this is going to do it for me. You know, I've tried out so many things, but okay, I might, but no. So we see that if we want to start with a person that is so, it's his life or his habit to live in the functions of the neocortex, and then we ask them, how are you doing? What do you mean, how am I doing? I don't know. I mean, I'm doing okay. What do you mean? You know? So we are asking sometimes questions that go down here or here. And what I'm trying to bring across is that we cannot exclude any of these pieces. Actually, for true process work, we need to be smart. For a person to actually really move into the depth that we know is possible, somebody needs to feel safe. In order to go to that stillness and into that healing space of the tide, there needs to be somebody that holds that safe environment and accompanies, so I don't have to go there alone. And then often after the session, we can actually make sense out of what happened and maybe talk about it a little bit more in a sense of, and how are you doing now? Let me see what's next there. I think I wanted to just, I was already talking over the pictures. Well, no, go back once more. We have the brainstem, instinctual, in charge of survival. We have the next the next would be the limbic system that is interested and curious in adventure and in exploration. Now, that's a really nice therapeutic quality. If somebody is interested and curious about themselves, the session is already half done. You know, because they want to know more about themselves. We develop that capacity. Do you know the little 2-year-old, 3-year-old that start to explore the world? It's like we want to know more about the world, about our world. And the limbic system thrives in contact and in that feeling of we. We do that together. Not me alone, not you alone, but we together. We inquire into health. We inquire into that inner intelligence. We inquire into what is present now. Yeah. And the next one is when we look at the neocortex, which is really responsible for making sense of our experiences. That's also where the observer has a space, the witnessing consciousness, the ability to actually think something through, reflect something, and just being, without creating an opinion right away. So when we look at this triune brain, our work is really in that meeting place that when we have a contact and a connection, we can start with the work that sometimes we call the process. Now that might be craniosacral biodynamics, that might be the mindfulness process, that might be any kind of therapeutic work. I'm not going to go into any method work right now because we've heard about the tide, we've heard about primary respiration. We know what we do on the level of working with someone. The orientation here is that this is not good enough to just stay with the process. We need a phase of integration. And integration is sometimes for cranial people happens inside a session on the table. Sometimes it happens in a talk after the session. But when we are looking at these brain functions, and we have the sensing brain, we have the feeling brain and the thinking brain, integration, a smart neurobiological integration is that from the bottom to the top, or from the top to the bottom, they communicate with each other. Integration means that there is a coherency between their function. And not one is in the foreground and the other one has no job to do. It's from the bottom up or from the top down. There's also right-left integration. Now, where do you think is craniosacral biodynamics mostly at home? From the bottom up or from the top down? Show me with your hands. Yeah, I see many from below to up, yes. See, that goes into that question from this morning that, well, sometimes something good happens for the client and we might not know about it, but we feel something changed, something shifted, something normalized. We're more in contact with wholeness and health. The client might not have any understanding of what happened, but they might feel themselves differently, sense themselves differently. And as Franklin was talking, it was very beautiful to hear him use words that are very familiar to me too. We come into contact with our essence, with our potential, with the potency of the tide that brings forth all of us, all of who we are. So here is a client that says, well, I don't know what you did, but it feels great. So a lot of work happened from an integration from below, from sensing, from integrating the felt sense and the way we have a physical sensation to how we feel about that. And then if I have to use word and think about it, well, maybe in that moment after a session, it's a little bit like we after Franklin's guided meditation, we go like, I can't really think right now. You know, like feels so nice. Let me live here forever. So then it could be important, one more step, and I have to see in a minute where we are with that. It's if we want to help the integration of function so that we function as a whole, at our best, the way we know we can be, where we feel we have our spirit here, our soul, our capacities, our body, our mind is clear, feeling is clear. You know? That feeling, when that's present after a session, nobody can tell you this doesn't work. Is that true? Did you have some clients like that? Where they just know something shifted. I don't know what, but something shifted. I feel more like myself. Yeah. So we could, if we wanted to, we could let them know that you really worked well in integrating different parts of yourself. You did a fantastic job regulating your nervous system. It was amazing how in that depth of the stillness, your whole body unified into one drop of nectar, manna. You know, it feels yummy. As a practitioner, it feels yummy to be present with you in that process. Now, that's something we can cultivate. Would you like more of that? You know, because I think that's where we want to make sure that it's not just one experience here in this session, and then you go home and you forget all about this. No, that was some of the questions this morning, you know, like, well, then people have this experience, then they go home, they forget, they come back, and it's back to how it was. Yes, that's true, because we are creatures of habit. We go back to what we like because we know it, because we've done it all our lives, and that's how we know ourselves, and let me not change anything from there. I'm okay. So yes, I go back to my own old habits. We need to practice these new learnings. We need to practice and continue to practice so the integration continues and it's not a one-time experience. So let me see where we're going from next. Yes, I think I went way past that slide. It's, but let me go back anyway, just so that I keep on track with myself. The we that we create in our therapy has to do with resonance and attunement and with meeting on a level of empathy, compassion, kindness. And in that safety and support, the work can happen. Now, I need to say something else here. When I talk about the we, practitioner and client, I hope that when you work, that you feel that you also get treated, that you also get a treatment from the tide, from the health, from the oneness, from the essence. So ideally, doesn't always happen that way, but ideally the practitioner, by being present practices reconnecting in the same way as we want the client to develop. So often I feel after a session, I feel better than before the session. Then new students usually feel a little guilty and think like, oh my God, I feel better than before. Is that okay? Yes, in that in that dance between us, there is a rapport. And I might be the leading person by orienting to health and the tide, but the client follows me there, and then we are together in that healing field where transformation can happen. Yeah. And as we move on, we want to look at how that is actually very smart way to work on a neurobiological level. And I've been really diving deeply into the newer studies of interpersonal neurobiology, because it explains a lot of what we're doing, and we sometimes don't know why it works. We can say, yes, there is a regular rhythm that makes that body feel whole and one and regulated and settled. And when we look at the studies that are a bit more recent, that's not anymore Sutherland. No, that's now. Sutherland died in 1954. So we kind of need to find support for our work in the times now. Like you were talking about the science that starts to bring in the information again. So the interpersonal neurobiology, when we look what that is, it is really telling us that we learn in relationship. We learn new things as babies in contact. We learn in relationship when we feel inspired. Then the neurons fire together. So the inspiration and the firing of the neurons goes hand in hand. And I remember one of the first times I heard Gerald Hüther, it's a German neurobiologist, talk about this. And he said, what do you think? Can an 80-year-old man still learn Chinese? Well, it could be hard work, you know, like, and why would he want to? And then he said, well, of course he can, especially if he is in love with a 60-year-old Chinese woman. So he wanted to tell us that by being in love, where the hormones are stimulated, where the limbic system works, where the neurons fire together, we learn easier, we learn more, we can expand our learning. And the interpersonal neurobiology talks to us also about keeping the brain alive and fostering neuroplasticity. So the brain can actually keep on learning and growing and changing. And I thought, like, but that's what we do in our cranial work. You know? We're working with all these structures, and then we have an ignition, and things start to fire and work better. So yes, that's part of the scientific background that we do when we work with our clients. So in that interpersonal neurobiology, with that background that we learn best in relationship, in that we that we create, let us just see what comes next. Yes, exactly. It's that inspiring, that inspiration to also rewire our brain. And if we want to get out of the habitual limitations, rewiring is something that happens through making new experiences. Making new and positive experiences also. In a cranio session, I feel good. I feel whole. I feel one. We're rewiring our brain. And in that safety in relationship, that is possible to happen. I was recently on the dentist chair, and they had a new dental hygienist that cleans the teeth. She was so anxious and nervous. She was new in that office. And I thought, it's okay, I can regulate myself, it's all right. But you know what happens to the reptilian brain, right, in the dentist chair. You're there, kind of lying back, the belly nicely exposed. That's dangerous. Then you have to keep your mouth open. That's also not always safe. And as she was working on me, she started to tell me one horror story after another. From breaking a leg, to somebody dying on her chair, to if I don't clean my tongue, I will get cancer. So there was no safety. So now I was a bit more resourced, so I told her to please stop telling me these disaster stories, It's not good for me. But I'm just saying, when we meet someone and we help them settle and arrive, I can even on that dental chair relax and be fine because it doesn't feel dangerous what she brings to me. Yeah, so we start often with body awareness, with the felt sense. How are you doing today? I don't know. Well, any place in the body that feels relatively okay? I'm not sure, okay, so let's take a moment to feel your feet, to feel your pelvis. Let's settle. How is that going? Yeah, I feel there's a bit of weight, a bit of pressure here. That's good. How is that? Yeah, makes me like I'm landing more, I'm arriving more. So right away we have the body present and the felt sense present. So we're talking and we are courting. Do you know that word? Courting. Did it come across in the translation? Courting. We are courting the reptilian brain. Like two lovers. I want to make sure we bring them flowers. We bring them a gift. So you need to talk to the reptilian brain that way. You need to court it. You need to entice it to work with you. And for that we need to slow down. We need to add the language of the reptilian brain, which is the felt sense. That's how it talks to us. So let's assume we have had our body awareness and the felt sense, and then, as you sense your body like that, how do you feel? Well, still a little, I'm touching on these edges. I'm a little sad these days, I'm bringing in some grief, like I just lost also people in my life, and it's not so easy. So we have a feeling state that might arise at the beginning. Often, some of the feelings that want to be seen and held and heard. People don't often come to sessions because they are in joy and exuberant and happy and pain-free and everything is okay. They come because they're holding something. So welcome the feeling state. There's nothing to do about it. It's nothing to change. It's just to say, oh, I hear you're sad and you have lost somebody recently. How is that for you? Yeah. And as we're including the felt sense and the feeling states with mindfulness, with somebody that's present to observe, to say, now it's shifting, now something is changing. And we are adding that part that can think and speak and observe and report and say, oh, that's interesting, you know. As I was settling deeper here, and then I felt this sadness, and right now it just feels like I'm a little bit more expanding. Well, that could be a really nice place and a really nice time to go to the table now to start working hands-on. How about that? Yeah, let's do that. And we're working our process, you know, we're doing whatever work we do, and we do help that new insight, these new states, the new insight, that new level of consciousness. We really want to help that to integrate and to be absorbed on a cellular level. So we have it. It's not because of the practitioner. It's you that has that experience. Now, maybe not to confuse, I say it again. I want to make sure that the client claims his or her own capacities and potential. This is your work that I accompanied. You did that, and I was holding the space and the orientation with my skills, my capacities. That's my role, and you did the work. So let us see how it can get integrated, that you have it, and it's not about me. So the integration process, and I'm talking really here about ideal flow of a session where we set up the meeting, we start to process, we have an integration, and maybe it's the next one, or to support neuroplasticity, yeah? That really the brain can change, and therefore we have more access to health. Now this definition of the World Health Organization, it's actually, we should take that out of Wikipedia. It's an impossible ideal. We look at health very differently. Health that is always present. In illness, in sickness, in patterns, in problems. And where is the health in that? That health that cannot be manipulated and changed or reduced or made more. And health that is always present. You know, we can talk about the inner wisdom and the inner intelligence, the potency, the tide, the potential. That's all always present. And as we work, we just support that to be more in the foreground and acknowledged as something that is never lost. So as the session comes to a conclusion, and that dance that continues between the practitioner and the client, we really have been looking that our work is our work is not isolated in our practice room. But in order for it to have that effect on the person, on their life, on their growth, on their transformation, we need to add one more phase, which is called transfer. How do we transfer all what we learned, what we experienced, what we recognized, and the insight and the discoveries? How do I transfer that to my daily life? To normal meetings, to being with someone else, to being with me, to applying the principles that we practice in a session outside the session. And I'm convinced, now I don't have the proof of course, but I'm convinced if a craniosacral practitioner would take care more of that transfer, we would not have these frustrating clients that then come back and say, nothing changed. It's always the same. Of course, you need to go and practice what you learned. In order for your brain to change, you need to practice. Now, I don't know how many years mindfulness has been practiced here. You know? Meditation, 40 years of meditation. It's never finished, that practice. And by the way, I don't know what you practice, of course, outside your cranial sessions, but there's one thing that struck me. I meditate for 40 years. That would be my timing. Am I supposed to stop? It was a nice sound. In my meditation, sometimes I go crazy with my mind. It really doesn't let me go into meditation. It never, ever happens in a cranial session when I'm the practitioner. Something about, you were saying it so beautifully this morning, you know, like you need to offer something to the mind that it can look at, that it can observe, that it can follow. And what do we follow as practitioners? What do we observe? Yeah. So we're orienting to health, the expression of the tide. We're immersed in that wide field that centers us as much as we center ourselves. And that's one of the reasons, I think, that we feel better after a session. Because we practice mindfulness for an hour. We practice presence for an hour. And it is easier in relationship for me. Don't know how it is for you. So how can we transfer that in our daily life? And how can we help the client to transfer the learnings in the daily life? That's something that we're looking at in our trainings more and more, that the sessions are not these isolated peak experiences, but it's going to be a normal experience. My birthright is joy. My birthright is to be connected with my essence. My birthright is to feel my soul present. Then somewhere during our early lives, we lose all that, and then we search for wisdom, and we search for ourselves, and we search, and we search. So sometimes just to give our clients the task to feel their legs and their pelvis just for a minute or two a day. Or just to settle before they go to sleep. And the brain integrates the new learnings easier and can transfer it into daily life. Now, I have a lot of examples. Even today, you know, like I walked through the hallway here, and I have to say it is such a pleasure to see so many people that I actually know from trainings or from meetings. And so we stopped, we talked, and it's at least 5 people that said, you know, I'm still using the principle. I use it on my everyday. I use it with my son. I do it when so they were telling that some of what we practice, and maybe it's 10 years ago, it stayed. But we practice the whole training, so it's one time is not enough. So practice being present with a hand, with a beloved, with a friend, with an animal, with that olive tree out here. Did you see the olive tree? That old, gnarly olive tree. Just see the beauty around you. Look at people with eyes of recognizing their beauty, their preciousness. That's what we can continue to give. And I think maybe we have 1 or 2 more. Yeah, from the older people to the very young ones. We have these clients that just love to feel felt, to feel met. Next one. Yeah. So I don't know how you do with the word love, because it's a bit abused sometimes, you know, misunderstood. But there is really a feeling that if we want it to be very simple, we could just say, yeah, look, what I do in my work, I just make sure that love is present again for you, for me, for us humans, because that's what we are meant to feel when we meet. And I think I'm coming slowly to the end. I have another picture that I put actually after Karin's lecture. I thought, I want to show you this next picture. For me, this is the symbol of the body, in the fluid body, in the bigger field, connected to the universal life force. So as we have a client that we are holding in safety, acceptance, love, care, we are held by a bigger force, which is held by a bigger force. So I never ever feel alone in my sessions, even though the client might be asleep or checked out. The tide connects us. This is a picture from Frida Kahlo, Mexican painter. And she called it the love embrace of the universe. We can see the client and the practitioner and the Earth Mother of nature, which is a little bit like the fluid body, that's expression of nature. But we still have another mother. And when we talk about the tide, we often talk about that love of the big mother that nourishes us both. And that is, for me, always a nice reminder when that part of me starts to come up that feels like, oh, I have to do something for the client. Can I step back again? Can I lean back again? I hope I had so many thoughts in my head that I didn't confuse you with too many things. My main interest was to kind of continue to inspire you to do what you're doing. And to create a field with each other where we know we can rest in trust that something bigger, a bigger force is at work, a higher ordering principle, like Avicenna already used to say, an old Persian philosopher. So Avicenna, as a Persian philosopher and medicus in the 12th century, he said, health is not facilitated by the physician, but by a higher ordering principle, which gives form to matter. Yeah. So if we're relying on a higher ordering principle, however we might call that, that's really what facilitates the health and the well-being of our client as we hold the space for that. That would be it for me, I think. Thank you for listening, staying awake till the end.